So just, why don't we get rolling here? This is going to be largely interactive. I'll go through a few slides, but then I'd really like to work on some of your case studies, because that's what this is all about, really an interactive workshop. A little about me, 25 years leading product teams in creating winning products in the lab instrument industry. Built a $30 million software business within a lab instrument company and took the market leadership position in that software category away from some pretty entrenched big competitors. One of them was HP before they spun it out as Agilent. And additional experience in a couple of startups, one I'm still consulting to at the moment. Currently in a search for another leadership role in product management, but I'm a word nerd, so I do the crossword puzzle every day and learn German fluently and Spanish to a pretty good degree, so I'm really interested in language in general. And what this session is going to focus on is really the words, the messaging. So let's dive right in. Here's what I'll be going through in a few slides, and then we'll open it up after that. How ad money gets wasted, how to avoid wasting ad money, and then let's go into an open session.
Quick question, are we going to focus on advertising only or
No, it's
messaging
really
from
marketing.
a general perspective?
This is marketing messaging. It shows up in advertising.
Okay.
I'm going to be focusing on some advertising cases to begin with, just to show that the underlying marketing message was either off track or what went wrong before you even put it into an ad. So I'm not even going to show any pictures of ads. I'm just going to be talking about.
No, the reason I asked that is because depending on your target customer and how you want to reach out to them, right? Your messaging can completely change. Say if I were my customers are all nerds, like engineers, right?
Absolutely.
So the way I need to appeal to their mindset will be completely different from a consumer product where you're trying to put an advertisement, say on the billboard or on the TV ad or whatever it is, right?
Indeed. But the same principles apply whether you're using a commercial broadcast channel or a billboard, or whether it's a face-to-face conversation with a high-level person selling into an enterprise. The underlying marketing messaging is still a core principle, and that's what we're trying to get to here.
Okay.
So if you don't get that foundation right, you're not going to resonate with what the customer needs.
Sure.
And we'll just take a look at a few examples. So John Wanamaker was one of the pioneers in advertising, and he had the famous quote, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half." So, and it's true that a whole lot of what gets sprayed out there never gets seen or never gets acted upon. It's difficult to measure. It used to be that the number of impressions you needed to make in order to get somebody to actually retain a concept used to be around 7 to 10. Then it's got up to 15. Now it's up in the range of 30 or more because of all the noise, all the input coming from people all the time. So standing out amid all that noise and chatter is getting more and more difficult. There was a great session, the second session in the morning by Tim Johnson and I'll remember his name in a minute. I've got his card. There it is. Ken Rutsky did a great job on telling stories and how you can tell the hero's journey, and that's a way of getting that story to actually stick in somebody's mind. But let's just look at some of the initial messages. So let's see, some of the ways that ad money gets wasted. Poor distribution, you don't get it out to the right people. Either the wrong audience, poor placement, or maybe it was just bad timing. You made a cheap ad buy and it ran at 3 in the morning when nobody was up, for example, that kind of a thing. Or insufficient reinforcement. I just mentioned the number of impressions has to be so much higher with traditional types of advertising. Another good read, if you haven't read it, is Seth Godin's Permission Marketing. That whole concept is centered around the idea of getting away from this thing he calls interruption marketing, where you're just trying to grab somebody's attention when they're focused on something else, and instead get into a relationship where you've delivered some value to them in the past, so they're open to hearing from you. So most of the things that you might sign up for, where you're getting a newsletter, that's an example of permission marketing. You've given them permission to communicate, and you build a relationship over time without trying to sell something to you too hard. The other way is ineffective messaging. This is what we're going to focus on mostly. Unclear content, ineffective targeting, or annoying delivery. Nobody likes that ad that comes on at top volume in the middle of some quiet program you were watching, for example. So I'm going to go through 6 examples of lame ad messaging that I've come across. And I'd like you to tell me what you think is lame about it. So I've heard this on the radio. With Constant Guard, Anyone want to guess who this is? Anyone heard this one? It's Comcast. With Constant Guard, customers get security and peace of mind. Anything strike you about that one that could be better? The one that bothers me about it is it's really third person, customers. So that's an abstract concept. Some customers who get this, it's not very targeted, it's not very personal. If they had said, with Constant Guard, you get security and peace of mind, oh, if I get Constant Guard, then I would get this. But this thing about, well, that's nice for those customers who get that, but well, why do I care? Okay? So getting it into a second person language is an important first step, as if you're having a one-to-one conversation with somebody. Anybody heard of moo.com, fancy business cards and such? Yeah. This is one of their taglines. With Printfinity, you can print a different image on every card.
Why?
That's it. So what? Why do I want to do this? Why should I care? What would I use that for? Wait a minute. I spent how much time optimizing my business card and getting the graphics into the right place, and now you want me to change it with every card? Why would I want to do that? So what they've done here is failed to give a clear benefit. Why would I want to do this? Why should I care? And they didn't explain that ever to me as to why I would want to do that. It might be kind of nifty if you were, I don't know. I don't see the application. This is a classic one. Singular used to have a billboard up in San Francisco that said, fewest dropped calls.
Still drop calls.
This was in the early days of cell phones, right? So I didn't have a mobile phone at the time. What's my reaction to that?
I would never get cell phones.
I'm not going to get
Exactly. It was focusing in on a drawback. It was focusing my attention on not what was great about a mobile phone, but oh, here's an issue I'm going to have to worry about. Oh, maybe I'm not ready for that. And indeed, that made me think twice, do I want to get a mobile phone yet? So that's kind of sending the wrong message, right? Focus in on you want to be focusing on the advantages and allaying concerns about drawbacks, but don't make it the core of your campaign. By the way, this one, Singular, ended up getting a lot of recognition and attention because they made another version of this, which was pretty clever. In Times Square, they put up a humongous billboard where they had the word dropped actually ripped out of the billboard, and it was down on the ground. So it showed some creativity in the physical dropping. Nevertheless, it's still a negative message. Our cloud-based system is designed to help businesses grow faster. What could be better about this? I'll point out a few things here. Cloud-based system. Tell me what a cloud-based system is or does or why I should care. Anybody? No? Oh, you've all heard it, right? Cloud's cool, right? So they're depending on us to already know what cloud is about and why we should care. We know it's kind of a techie jargony thing that's going around, and if you're not cloud, you're not cool, but really there's no clear benefit to that, right? And then there's what I call wimpy wording in here. Several pieces of it. Is designed to. Anytime you see that, try taking it out, see what happens. Our cloud-based system helps businesses grow faster, stronger, right? But helps how much? Well, if it only helps, maybe it's an insufficient solution, right? How about our cloud-based system enables businesses to grow faster? You see how much stronger we can make that? Anytime you say is designed to, you can just strike that right out and you'll end up with a stronger statement to begin with. I don't care what it was designed to do. Does it actually accomplish that? I mean, you made a best effort, you get a little star, but unless you're actually solving my problem, I don't care. So getting down to what people care about. So the techno jargon with no clear benefits and the wimpy wording are two problems with this one. I got just two more. We're committed to making small businesses and nonprofits into marketers. Anybody heard this one?
Constant contact.
Yeah, this was Constant Contact. Very good. So what's in there? What do you think?
Committed.
Committed, okay, so they're dedicated to it, so they don't necessarily achieve it. Good point. Others?
They don't want to be marketers?
They don't want to be marketers. How many small businesses and nonprofits, especially nonprofits, want to be perceived as those hucksters who go out there and market to people and pound them with spam and stuff like that? No, they don't want to be perceived that way at all. So they're trying to sell a benefit that the customer doesn't actually want, or it's not necessarily a benefit in their mind. They're trying to sell them on a message that's not even relevant to that audience. Most small businesses would like to focus on their small business, their profits, their customers.
Right.
They don't want to be perceived as marketers by any stretch, right? So for constant contact to say, hey, we're going to turn you into a marketer, that pitch falls kind of flat. This was a full-page newspaper ad from a chiropractor. This doctor admits to curing no one. Comments?
They're in the same bad company.
Well, the credibility is gone before it's even established.
But what's the
Why would you say that?
context to it?
Yeah.
Full page ad, big headline. His photo, he's there with his kids.
It's a doctor's ad.
It's a doctor's ad. A
Oh, okay.
chiropractor.
It's supposed to be funny, probably.
It's supposed to challenge your assumptions or to make you say, what? To knock you off balance. And, that's a cute stopping thing, but again, it takes, the underlying message is taking away credibility before it's established. Because he comes in and says, oh no, I don't cure you, I just do my stuff and you cure yourself or something like that. But he had a full newspaper ad of 8 to 10 point font with paragraphs and diagrams. Not very many diagrams, mostly text. Nobody's going to read that. The ad density was a full page in 10 point font and bad targeting. So anyway, I'd like to get into the next, what are solutions to some of these problems? How do you avoid wasting the ad money and the marketing and messaging money? The most important rule for product marketers, do what? It's the same rule for anybody who's writing a novel or any piece of text. What do you need to do?
Know your audience.
Know your audience. And look at it from the perspective of them. Can't tell you how many times I take a piece of writing that somebody's done and I say, okay, ask yourself this question. How could this be misinterpreted? And when they sit and think about it, most of the time they can come up with 2 or 3 different alternative and incorrect interpretations of whatever they've written. So, when you find yourself writing a piece of marketing messaging or ad copy, ask yourself, would I pay attention to this? Would I understand it? Would I see any value in it? Will I have a positive impression of the advertiser? I certainly don't have a positive impression of that chiropractor. Would I remember the offering and the advertiser? Would I be likely to take action? Because, hey, when you get down to it, the goal of marketing and advertising is to get someone to take action or change a behavior or change a perception. Will you be likely to get any of these to take effect? So, how can we do that? Some tips for making a better ad or a better marketing message. Make it attractive or at least inoffensive. I still remember, so in Switzerland they do things in an interesting way on television. They don't interrupt the program every 10 to 15 minutes with commercials. They pile all the commercials up in a 1 or 2 hour segment at the beginning of the day, then they do all the programming, and then they may do some commercials at the end. What effect do you suppose that has?
Advertising has to be much more creative.
The advertising is more creative, it's of high quality, it's Super Bowl quality. Because they're not going to get an audience if they don't have content that people want to watch. So I saw an ad, I guess it was in the Clio Awards, where they showed, it was an ad for a washing machine. And they opened up with some women in India doing the laundry, beating clothes upon the rocks, right? And then they bring in the new washing machine, oh, the new whatever, and they're fawning over it saying, oh, it's wonderful. And then there's voiceovers telling you about a few of the features and such. And as they pan back at the end of the commercial, they're still there at the river, but now they're beating their clothes against the washing machine. So it's humorous, but I remember that one from 15, 20 years ago because it made such a positive impression. I don't remember the company, and unfortunately I can't tell you who did it, but I'd be willing to look it up. Now, HSBC Bank Corp did a campaign that was extremely memorable for me because they did a contrast campaign where they took the same image and they gave it completely opposite interpretations. And the whole point of their campaign was context matters and your perspective matters. They had a lot of really powerful visuals and very simple one-word messages with that. And you can go look up that campaign. I'd recommend you check that out.
Which campaign again?
HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corp. I have a link to it somewhere, so if you send me a note, I can go dig it up, because I went and looked them all up sometime, and it was really good stuff. So you want to offer a clear solution to an audience need. If you don't have a solution for a problem, why should they pay attention, right? In this case, their problem was beating the clothes on the rocks. They didn't quite communicate on the solution effectively, but the target, make sure that the message is personal and relevant. Again, constant contact coming to small business owners and saying, we're going to make you into a marketer. Wrong, not what they wanted. Provide a reason to pay attention. Some of the good reasons to pay attention are you're going to learn something that you care about. You'll be entertained, you'll get some humor. So humor is one of the best devices to use. How many of the Super Bowl ads are humor driven, right? At least half of them, right? Other ones, if you think of 1984, the Apple ad when they released the Macintosh, that one was aspirational and transformational. So they weren't using the humor, but provide a reason to pay attention. Make it memorable. So, what kinds of challenges are you working through on your advertising, your marketing messaging? Where could you use some help? Who's willing to offer something that they're trying to work on, and maybe we can work on it as a group, come up with some ideas of how to make that stronger. Is no one working on any marketing messaging at the moment? What's your challenge?
Mine right now? My biggest challenge actually, I think, is just convincing someone to think of a different way of presenting.
So people have gone through slide whippings and PowerPoint decks.
Yeah, people know how to use a PowerPoint, but we're trying to change the behavior, right? So it's human behavior we're trying to change potentially. When they're using our platform, that means they're a different way of engaging with the audience. That's a very different way of presenting.
So they've got some inertia to get over. What is the problem that they have now that you're actually addressing?
The actual problem is, so our product is geared towards speakers and primarily like sales and marketers who actually wants to understand who their audience is, the attendee audience.
So let's
for leads, for example, marketing leads or sales leads.
So if we start with a core concept, a lot of times a salesperson, marketing person will get up and do a presentation, and it's one way, and they don't know if they're hitting the target except whether people are getting up and leaving, falling asleep, or whether they are leaning forward
They're
in their
not
seats.
engaged and stuff like that. With our platform, if the attendees are using our platform to follow along, you can increase the engagement because with the platform, the speakers can push out polls and other things to get them to be paying attention, but also anything that the attendees do, we track. So we can identify who the attendees are that are most engaged.
So do you see the core problem that they're actually getting to, resolving here, or addressing? Do you remember that a few slides back I had the word emotional up there? Emotional is one of the most powerful ways you can connect with an audience. What does a presenter feel when they're up there and they feel the audience drifting away? It leaves a really horrible feeling in there. So if you can key off of that emotion and say, let me paint a picture. You're up in front of 30 important customers at a conference, you're trying to deliver, and you're starting to realize that they're getting away from you.
Right.
Wouldn't it be better if you knew what was going on in their heads? Here's a way you can do that, and get them to interact with you and direct your presentation where you're gonna get the most benefit.
Exactly.
They're gonna be asking for your card at the end, they're gonna be reaching out to you instead of you having to chase them down.
Right.
So you can build a campaign around that concept, but I would tap into that emotional piece at first, because who here is comfortable with public speaking and really enjoys getting up in front of a group?
Right.
I was one of you. I've gotten to the point where I really enjoy it. I did a talk on Thursday and came away from that, and people were asking for my card and telling me I totally rocked it, and it was just interactive and everything. Again, that interactivity, I firmly believe in it. I think you've got something good to sell. How many people have, in the audience, have been through a PowerPoint slide whipping and not appreciated that? Now, maybe you're not selling directly to them, but if you sell to the people who are delivering the presentations, every one of them has been in an audience before. They understand that pain. So you get them to understand the pain points on both sides, and then you can present it as, hey, I can make you feel better. We can do a better job with that. Who else has a case that we could work on? What kind of products have you got?
Well, I have a developer tool that's mainly geared towards enterprise companies. So I'm not sure it's applicable to this workshop so much.
Oh, you'd be surprised. So we had technical audience, didn't we? Yeah. So you're selling to wireheads and engineers primarily?
Yeah.
Engineers actually are underneath people too, and they are surprisingly diverse. They have a lot of different interests. Some of them will be really driven to put things into boxes and such, but they still have underlying needs, emotions, and such. And so if you can tap into those, tell us a little more about what the solution you're selling is like.
Yeah, it's an API to process images in bulk. So we deal with heavy volumes and we do image compression with that along.
And is this static images or video or?
Currently static images. Next step is videos.
I have a contact who might be of interest to you to talk to who's going to do a startup in that area. But this was specific to movie and game technology, that sort of thing. Anyway, so what's the problem the customers are facing?
Well, we are early stage, so I think that there's a lot of pieces that are missing, to engage properly. We have those.
You don't have a total solution.
Right.
But
the solution is there, but the front-facing solution is not. So, for example, we have a demo, right? You can put an image and see how much it was compressed, and the fact that it looks exactly the same but much smaller in size. But then there's a lot of statistics that go along with that are not there yet just because we don't have time.
it hasn't been built out yet.
Right.
But are you to the point where somebody looks at the demo, recognizes, this fits to a problem I have.
Right.
This hits a pain point. I want to talk some more to you. I mean, because that's about all you can hope for at this point if you don't have a total or a minimum viable product yet ready for market. So what's the message that you would first approach these people to that would get them even to want to look at the demo, other than it's something to tinker with?
Well, we lower your expenses and make your product faster, so increase your conversion rate in the same time.
So expenses are not so much from storage as it is from processing time, right?
CDM and processing time.
Yeah. So it's everybody's addicted to speed, and that never goes down. Expectations only go higher for how fast things should be done. So one of the underlying things that all their customers and their peers are going to respond to is, hey, better performance, right? Faster, less waiting time. I can get on with my life. Life's short. So if you start pitching the emotions that underlie you don't have time for waiting around for 1,000 pictures to unload. We'll get it done in 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. You get people's attention pretty well with that because everybody has other things they'd rather be doing with their time than waiting for something, right? Have we got any other cases we could look?
Our company's been around, it's a late-stage startup. It's been around for 10 years, and I think in the time, the market has changed. So the product itself hasn't changed, but the use cases and the market have changed.
Kind of pivoting a little bit?
Pivoting a little bit. So,
Is the customer base changing? Is it the same
I mean,
people with
obviously
different
everybody-
needs, or is it?
I think the
a different set of
personas, the buyer personas might have changed a little bit.
Okay.
With the cloud, I think we are kind of seeing.
Well, cloud-based is cool, and we've already established cloud-based is cool.
Yeah, so I guess there's some pressure from the upper echelons to make our messaging more AI and ML focused. The product itself is not ML or AI. I feel like we're seeing a trend where everybody says AI ops.
Okay, so that's the new buzz
buzzword.
phrases that you got to put in there just to keep up
Just
with
to
the
get
competitors.
attention. So what are your thoughts on that, right? Because we
Well,
know what our
if-
product does, but it's not that
Couple of
cool,
thoughts
right?
on that. Yes, you can get initial attention if you throw the latest buzzwords in there. But it's kind of like putting keywords on a resume. What does it do for you? Well, it gets somebody to glance at it maybe. But does it sell them? Not necessarily. It's what you've actually accomplished in doing that sells somebody, and how much have you fit to solving whatever their problem is. Are you really clear that you've got a targeted solution that's better than the competitors have, and why?
Our competitors are using those buzzwords in their MSP.
Sure they are, but if you get an objective customer to sit down and look at these, if they were to draft up a buyer's guide, would they come up saying, oh, these other ones are better because they have AI, or is it actually delivering a benefit? Is it just cool, or is it actually delivering a
You
benefit?
could argue that this would be used by data scientists for ML and AI. I mean,
Are the data scientists decision makers in this?
they would be
Or
end
influencers?
users.
End users. Are they buying decision makers now?
No.
So who are the buying? Long time ago in my career, I learned you really got to find out who the key decision makers are, because oftentimes it's not the actual end users. I lost a pretty big order. Our team of 15 people went and did this demo for 25 people, and we lost the order not because of anybody in the room, but because of the one person who didn't show up to the room who was supposed to show up, and it was an IT person who decided, oh, we'll just buy from the same company we bought the other parts from, even though everybody else in the room voted for the other. So she had more pull, she had more power. She lost her job a year later when they couldn't get that solution in, and they brought us back, and we won the order a year later. But it was really humble pie, going through all that trouble and getting all the yay votes, and then finding out that we lost it because we didn't have the key decision maker.
Can I
Yeah, go ahead.
add to that? The thing is, marketing has changed on its head over the past 5-6 years
Oh,
or
yeah.
so.
A lot of
More
marketing
so
automation out
that
there.
high quality content,
Mhm.
and how do you capture mind share? So today's buyer is so savvy in the sense that everything is available in their fingertips. They're well educated in their
Not as many
journey
people go to trade
that
shows anymore. They
sales
don't use it
doesn't get
online.
involved
Yeah.
until much later stage. So in meanwhile, what are you doing to capture that, right? And then putting in buzzwords is actually might backfire if you
And
really
if you-
don't have those pieces in place, because they're smart enough to figure it out. And
Absolutely.
they'll call the bluff,
Exactly.
which is what I've
No, I
experienced.
think the problem is a little more political, right? We're being, the mandate is coming from elsewhere.
Mhm.
How do you?
Well, it's really important to find the key decision makers, make sure you're targeting them, but you may need to target different audiences also with different messages. And all of them may have influence on the same decision, because there may be technical decision makers, there may be business decision makers, there may be influencers who come in from finance saying, oh no, you've got to conform with this. There may be a regulatory person
Maybe.
in-house, et cetera.
So you ought to cater to all of them.
Well, yeah, but many times you need to do it with different messages. Or take the same core message package
Yeah.
and then just emphasize different parts of it a little more for different audiences. I had to do that once I got a 12-page brochure, and I had to address a dozen different markets and 4 different archetypes who had different priorities like that. so it was a real challenge, but I managed to lay out spreads that would emphasize a different part so that the sales rep could go in and then just kind of spend more time in the one spread that was most relevant to that person, go down to a different department and get into a different spread. But that's print media, and that's a while back.
So
We would use different tools
In
today.
a large group setting though, like when you were saying you were pitching to that whole group, and you had the buy-in from the 25%.
Yeah.
When you have different constituents and stakeholders in the same room, how would you message that? Because everyone's going to care about something different. So do you cover the basics?
A good strategy for that is to kind of paint an umbrella that says, look, I'm going to cover all this, and you make sure that your outline has a hot point for all the people in the room. That they know that you're going to get to a section that's going to really focus in on the part they care about most. And it may, you got to do things sequentially. You can't, unless you try to do a breakout. That's another way of doing it, is to get different people and have different demos. But in general, they want to get together in the same room and have conversations afterwards. We all heard the same thing, etc. So what you can do is at least set it up in the outline so you manage their expectations. Let them know that you're going to do that. And don't drill too deeply in the meeting in one topic area so much that you're going to bore everybody else. But then schedule a separate breakout if they need more detail than that. That's the way I'd handle that. Any other thoughts? All right, let's see. We've got just a few more minutes. If you want to handle another case, we could dive into someone else's. I mean, the whole idea of this one was to be interactive and try to dive into whatever you're working on, see if we can make that better.
So, I mean, not another case, but how do you avoid, in crowded markets, like, you want your message to be different from your competitors?
Indeed.
How do you, and at the same time, you also are influenced by what your competitors are message, their message, right? So how do you strike a balance,
Well, when you say influenced by, meaning
if they
you
are,
feel like you need to make the same message that they're doing in order to keep up with them?
yeah,
Or-
part of the same thing, maybe, I think going back to the buzzwords of what's happening in the industry today. So you want your message to be different from theirs, yet at the same time maybe addressing this core.
Well, you have to meet the table stakes of the customer, whatever those are. So a lot of times, everybody's messaging will focus on, yep, we check all the boxes, etc. That's fine, but that doesn't necessarily get somebody passionate about a solution, right? And they say, well, it'll probably work, but is it exciting? Not really. This is where the creativity part comes in, where you have to really think beyond what those fundamentals are that are just going to satisfy the need, and get into the emotional state of the customer, how their day is going to improve if they implement your solution, how they're going to get along better with the other people in the organization, or some other thing that taps in. A book I'd recommend reading is called Neuromarketing. It talks about 6 principles by which, or 6 core, it talks about selling to the old brain. A lot of our decisions actually are made down in the reptilian brain, the primal one below our cerebral cortex. So we think we're making our decisions way up in here. Really, they're made in core areas. And the 6 principles they talk about in the book are contrast. We notice contrast. We tend to remember the first and last of a list and forget a lot of what's in the middle. Emotion, visual. Visual's huge. It's a really short path from the eye to the brain, right? And we're really wired to take in images much faster than text or audio or anything else. So if you can present something visually, especially if it's got contrast in it, especially if it's got an emotional component to it, these are the kinds of things that resonate on the old brain. And I'm trying to remember, there's 6 of them all together, and I remember 4 of them off the top of my head, so a couple more. But anyway, it's called neuromarketing. I had those guys present at a marketing SIG I did some years ago, and I'm still using that stuff. 2 days after I had those guys present, I transformed an ad from something that was completely ineffective because a Marcom group had just taken some imagery from a brochure and tried to put it into an ad form, and it was nothing but confusion. Applied the principles, ended up with simplicity, with a problem solution, so that's a contrast. There was a upset, happy, there was a contrast. There was a simple messaging going on. So it was applying those principles, and it was much more effective at it. Look at those ways of differentiating. If they're appealing to just checking the boxes, that's a very analytical approach. If you come at it with a humanistic approach, that's going to differentiate you from those competitors. So I'd look at doing that, even if it is a technical audience, because underlying, they are people too. Look at some of the more successful ad campaigns in history. One of the Apple ones was the Think Different thing. So they were trying to differentiate from the PC world by saying, let's align ourselves with people who changed the world, you know, whether it's Gandhi or whether it was Einstein or some of these other, you know, leaders and thinkers. They were trying to create an emotional picture with that. Let's look at Netflix. What's their appeal? This watch all the content you want, complete convenience, do it at home, anytime, all you can eat, these kinds of things. But if you look at their advertising, it's going to be largely around how nice it is to have time with your family doing this activity. It's not just about being, or maybe it is being up on the latest Game of Thrones while you're talking around the water cooler or whatever.
Very subliminal, right?
Some of it is very subliminal,
Yeah.
but it affects that reptilian brain where we make a lot of these decisions. So again, if you get things aligning with what people actually care about, whether or not it's top of mind, if you just try to go through feature benefit and do, you know, we're 14% faster than them in this subcategory that you might use 3 times a year.
To that, I've come across this framework called Customers' Jobs to be Done
Yeah.
from Harvard.
Andrew,
Clayton
Anthony,
Christensen. Clayton Christensen's. I thought that was a nice way of framing the whole thing and finding out, hey, what is your customer trying to do?
mm-hmm.
What are they trying to deliver? What are the pain? Then you kind of bubble up the pain points. Now, can you somehow address
But think
that?
about some of the peripheral stuff that happens. So it's not just about does that photo take that much longer to do, but is it you're going to miss your kid's graduation because you had to stay at the office and do this, or your friends were going out bowling and you hadn't been bowling in 6 months and really wanted to go bowling, but you can't because you're stuck doing this job that has to be done at night tomorrow. Is your boss breathing down your neck because you're not getting done the whatever? So bring in some of those day in the life aspects of it, paint a picture, and then you bring it to life much more for people, bring in the emotional aspect of it. Are there any other things people want to cover? Because we're pretty much at time now, and want to make sure you have time to get to the next session.
I got something, and forgive me, it's not.
No, it's all right.
It's not a product marketing role. The current role that I have is serving an operations audience.
Mm-hmm.
And the operations audience is highly, highly technical. And what they love to hear in their messaging is no words, but a beautiful scatter diagram. You know, ways to take technical messages and show lots of data and just.
There are plenty of times where words are not the right vehicle. You might have 2 or 3 just to punctuate or give context, but it's the diagram that drives it home.
And here's where I'm getting with that. If we look at how we interact as humans outside of work, we go to videos on TV or anywhere,
YouTube or whatever.
YouTube especially, and that's how we communicate. There's that power in visuals. In work, we kill ourselves with PowerPoints, with scatter plots, and data tables. How can we find an intermediary to thread those 2 together? That's really my question coming in here to this group and see if there's any brainstorms.
Well, there are tools that are getting a lot better. If you look at Tableau for rendering graphics, for example, or for rendering data into visuals, that's an extremely powerful tool for trying to get away from a story, telling it all in words.
Think of, we do a weekly status update of everything that's going on a project. So there's not a lot of bandwidth and time for running, major productions in the background. You gotta turn them quick. But there's gotta be something other than taking a scatter plot and putting it into a PowerPoint.
So what a lot of the agile teams do is stick with the paper notes. I mean, some of them put them into electronic versions of that sort of thing, but other ones are still sticking papers on the wall because the physical act of getting up and going and grabbing something and moving it over here and saying, well, that's actually not as done as you said it was, and I'm gonna move it back there. The physical act of doing that often engages people more and gets them into a conversation they needed to have about development anyway. So a similar kind of thing could apply in that operations sort of context. Try to involve some physical device, often having a talking stick. Do you have a lot of people who talk over each other in these meetings? Or? No, they're pretty disciplined.
These are briefings to like 150 people, and
okay.
Executive VP down to individual contributor, once a week.
Still, some of the more powerful presentations are going to have 1 or 2 slides at the beginning that have maybe an image and maybe a word or two, but it's just more to punch a concept and a person talking, telling a story there. Then they can go into the charts and everything like that. What are they going to remember afterwards? Are they going to remember what was in the chart, or are they going to remember the story? So coming up with a story that says, hey, this month was a blowout. And you just show, like, I don't know, a bank building with the wall blown out or something like that. They'll remember that visual long, long after the meeting, but they won't remember the details of the numbers that were in there. They just remember, yeah, I remember that, what was it, last spring we had that blowout, that meeting about the blowout. That visual will stick far longer than anything else. So what I would do is I would deliver that content that they still expect, which is that charts and scattered plots and things that they go, oh yeah, I feel like I'm in my home turf. But shake it up a little bit by bringing in that emotional piece, that visual piece that they'll remember, and have a story that goes with it. Doesn't need to be a long story either. Short is better.
Yeah, I would consider maybe also before and after. So whether from 1 quarter or 1 meeting prior to now, just a quick, if there's a highlights of what switched. So that's one.
That's a contrast piece again that we respond to.
So the other one I would suggest would be also just pick a story, like you said, an example within that results. So let's say if I don't know specifically what your cases are, but let's say one of them happens to have a great customer story of some sort, like, hey,
Make
this
the customer the hero.
Yeah, this customer, we increased his or her purchase from $1,000 a month to $10,000 a month or whatever, right? Just highlight one of the aspects as a result of the change. Ideally, you want to marry the two together.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect, exactly, and then highlight with a personal story or example so people remember, oh, that's why this quarter was successful or whatever it is.
And it's also, why are we doing this anyway? We're doing this because we make people's lives better.
Yeah, or whatever your goal
It gives
is.
us a sense of core purpose that they may be lacking if they just go, well, I guess we hit the numbers, cool. They won't fire us.
Yeah.
It's not very fulfilling compared to making Janie's life better because Janie
Yeah, if you can
was
find one of
stressed,
those stories. I mean,
makes it personal, makes it human, makes it emotional.
it's like a case study. Like, I think when I was doing product marketing, we used to write up case studies on customer examples. This would be for individual meetings, would just be, small, minor case studies, right?
You said about 150 people, and it's on a weekly basis?
Mhm.
So in which case, how much do things really change on a weekly basis, right? That's a bigger question, number one.
Good.
And
The product development cycle is very fast.
yeah, so, but if it's really important for the management and also the rank and file, right? And they're all the same audience, right? It's hard to touch everybody's pain point or what delights them, right? So you need to pick and choose, like come up with a dashboard of what is really important and something that's really high level and kind of generates broader messaging. And also kind of nitty-gritty stuff, which is kind of actually helping move the needle, right? Like from cause and effect, right? How can you capture that all in a dashboard? And you're not bombarding people with too much of detail, just one slide which can speak for itself, right? Maybe that might,
Use that.
because on a weekly basis, I'm thinking, unless it's, operations, right? So there are a lot of things that can change on a weekly basis. Or you can do a trend analysis saying, hey, you know what, same time last year, it could be seasonal, for example. I'm just throwing a reason. And say, hey, this is why it's happening, and then this is what we need to do to kind of turn things around, or hey, continue doing whatever we're doing, it's really good. Let's step it up a little bit further, maybe.
I think the fundamental challenge that I'm having, and I'm wondering if anybody else sees this, is that the operations audience doesn't want to humanize it. They want that summary, the dashboard, and then they want the specifics behind it. Color, emotion, tapping into the reptilian brain. I've tried those tactics and highly, highly resistant to that.
Interesting.
And then call to action. That's another thing that you might want to wrap up with, right? Say, hey, this is what we need to be doing. Or
Well, I would challenge you though, if they care about numbers, can you tie the numbers back to their compensation or other things they actually do care about, like performance? So if they're like, hey, they don't care about the emotional side, fine. But if they would care if like that impacts their goals.
Because that's their own personal emotional
Exactly,
connection.
but you can tie it back and say, you know what, you're now 80% the goal instead of 90%, which is what you're, or we had decline and this is affecting the overall team goal or their personal goals. That's gonna get them to pay attention.
So, yeah, if you can pick for that success story or whatever it was, something that is gonna boil down to their movement on the dashboard of the metrics they care about, they'll be tuned into that story, sure. But it does have to tie to what they're doing. Because that's their personal emotional connection is, hey, I'm an operations person, I wanna see these, et cetera. And if it's not doing that, I'm not feeling in my area of competence.
Yeah, if they have like a higher percentage of failures, like, hey, this had a breakdown percentage went up, and they're being monitored or paid based on uptime, for example, and that affects uptime, or if I was that person, I would pay attention to why that uptime has gone down. Right?
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining in on this.
Thank you.
conversation. Enjoyable to hear your stories. Excellent contact info. You can catch me later if you want to have another conversation. In the meantime, let's let the other people in the room for the next show.